Jonathan Portis joins me down the line, Professor of Economics at King's College London and Senior Fellow at UK in a Changing Europe, and, I have to say, a regular on this show. Jonathan, what are we to believe when it comes to figures and statistics? And surely the public deserve to know.
Absolutely, and that's why the government publishes figures. But I'm afraid what you've just heard from Ben was complete nonsense, because I do, in fact, have the figures before me. And he is correct that last year, over the last couple of years, there were about a million, a little less than a million national insurance numbers issued to non-EU nationals. But that corresponds very closely to the gross immigration figures for non-EU nationals. Actually, the figures match up remarkably well. There were almost, pretty close. The same number of national insurance numbers were issued as the official ONS statistics show immigration. So to claim that there's some big discrepancy, Ben is just, I'm afraid, making this up. And let me also correct you, Nigel, because you said we measure migration using the International Passenger Survey. That is false, and it has been for some years. Unfortunately, some of the anti-migration groups haven't really kept up with what's actually happened. We do actually measure immigration by counting the number of visas that are issued and recording when people whose visas have been issued enter the country. Now, you may remember that both you and I criticized the government back in 2016 because there was then a very clear, big divergence between national insurance numbers issued and the figures. So you may be remembering that, and you were absolutely right, and I was absolutely right then. We were then stating EU migration. But that is not what's happening now. And in fact, over the last few years, the correspondence between national insurance number issuance and official immigration figures, given that we know there are all sorts of reasons why they don't quite match up. Some people don't register, some people are kids, some people leave within 6 months and aren't counted as immigrants because they're only short term, but they still may register for national. Given all that, actually the figures match up okay. So it is very difficult to measure immigration, and the figures are not right. Of course they're not right. There's a lot of uncertainty, there are estimates and so on, and they will be revised again. But suggesting that there's some huge divergence now,
okay, Jonathan,
is incorrect.
Okay. Even if I take your point that since 2016, we've got a bit more of a handle on this. Remember, at the time of the referendum, we were told there were 3 million EU citizens living in the country. It turned out there were 6 million. And what I was comparing, and I take your point about latter years, I was comparing the last 20 years. We could be out by several million, couldn't we?
That seems highly unlikely. So interestingly, we can actually look at the censuses, which of course are our best measure by far, where we actually go out and try and count people, and then we account for the people we haven't counted as well. And if you look at the total net migration between the 2011 and 2021 censuses, and compare it to the change in population between those two censuses, you actually get pretty close. A few hundreds of thousands at most. Now, that does reflect that we underestimated the number of EU citizens that were here, and we overestimated the number of non-EU citizens.
All right,
so we did
Jonathan,
get it wrong.
Thank you. I mean, Jonathan makes the point, in the last few years, we've actually got a handle on this.
Well, I disagree with that completely. I mean, I think there is a huge disparity. I mean, the latest government estimate, for example, of non-British migrants into the is 3,345,000. So, I mean, I just rest my case.
All right. I tell you what, gentlemen, I don't think you guys aren't going to agree.